to honor everybody's time uh, and make sure that we are staying on time, we'll go ahead and get started. So, hi, everybody. Welcome back. Happy afternoon. I hope everybody had a good working session. Um, I have the privilege of introducing Herb Thompson this afternoon for my very favorite topic. Herb, I am a geographer. I was trained as a geographer initially, and so I'm very excited about this session. So Herb, aka Geo-Man, is a longtime friend of the Amazon and Conopac. He also has a long history with National Geographic and was the co-coordinator of the Geographic Alliance in Nevada from 1997 until 2019, working closely with the Nat Geo Education Foundation to provide professional development for K-12 teachers throughout the state during summer institutes at the University of Nevada, Reno. He has served as an adjunct instructor for the College of Education at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and taught middle school and high school geography in Las Vegas for almost 30 years. Herb is the author of A Geographic View of World History and has created lessons for the Rand McNally Company and the Giant Traveling Map program at National Geographic. And if you don't know that program, please go look it up. It's fantastic. He's also an alumnus of the spring 1987 voyage of Semester at Sea and still volunteers and contributes to the Institute for Shipboard Education. Geo-Man has visited 84 countries on 6 continents and is a self-described geo-evangelist dedicated to increasing the geographic literacy of all Americans. Whoop, whoop. So who better to lead this session on Geo-Inquiry and expand our definition of inquiry into another sphere. Thank you so much for your time today, Herb.
Wow, thank you, Kelly. That introduction sounds familiar. I may have heard that one once or twice, but thank you very much. It's kind of nice to remember. I'm stuck on 84 for the last year and a half, like many of us probably are stuck on whatever number we're going to. I'm coming to you from the San Fernando Valley and not Las Vegas. I'm out here visiting a friend, doing a couple of things, and sitting outside in nice 80-degree temperatures. So I am ready to roll. I think it's probably going to take us this journey probably about 45 to 50. So don't be surprised if we're a little bit longer and we'll have time for questions. But I think it may take a little bit longer because I want to make sure we get through this introduction to not only geography inquiry, but just kind of the geographic perspective and how you use geography in other disciplines. So that's where we're going. I hope everyone's fresh and had a little break because you're going to have some fun now. So first of all, looking at this first slide, I assume everyone can see my favorite definition ever for what is geography comes from Alexander Graham Bell, which you guys, of course, know from the telephone and other inventions. And he's a pretty famous guy, but he was also one of the 9 co-founders at National Geographic. And early on, when they started National Geographic, he said about geography that the world, it's the world and all that's in it. And I've had students tell me, oh my gosh, that's a terrible definition. It's so broad. I thought definitions were supposed to be specific. And I was like, well, yeah, generally, yes. But for geography, we're looking for the widest possible perspective. So it's my favorite. That's why I throw it at the top. And I just want to remind everybody, I know some of you teach geography, that basically geography is in 2 halves. We have physical and we have human geography, but it's where they come together. The human environment interaction, how people interact with the physical world and vice versa, that's where geography shines. And that's why I think everybody should have a little background in geography, no matter what they're doing or what they're teaching. And there are 2 things we're going to talk about before we get to geo-inquiry. And one is just the geographic perspective, getting this big picture. And the other one is geographic literacy. The ability to use information and data spatially on maps and other tools so that we can see patterns and they can help us understand how the world works and, of course, help us make decisions about things, whether it's local or global. Those are the 2 strengths of geography, the perspective, definitely, okay, but also the idea that there is a such thing as geographic literacy. If you have some basic skills in geography, it's going to benefit you, it's going to benefit students. I realize I'm preaching to the choir for many of you, even those of you who teach science, because you use spatial tools all the time. To drive this point home, this is a couple of posters that I have in this presentation that I created with the Geographic Alliance. And I just use it to illustrate to students that geography is that one subject that can help you understand what you learn in any subject, any discipline. It doesn't matter if you're in middle school or if you're in the university, it can help. And so I created this one to let people know that geography is actually the world and everything in it. My students sometimes in junior high used to get so tired and say, oh my gosh, I thought this was geography. We're doing economics today. I thought this was geography. We're doing math. Boy, we're doing a lot of history the last couple of days. I thought this was geography. After a few weeks and months, they just stop saying that because they figure out, well, geography is in everything and you can use geography to help you. This slide is actually from Nat Geo. And I love it because it is really looking at the zoom lens of geography. So when geographers look at the world, they're not just looking at one single thing. It's like a helicopter view. They're looking at the spatial aspects, but cultures and the politics, economics, everything. And that's unusual in disciplines. Not for maybe science teachers or social studies teachers, but in other areas that probably is true. And then the lens, the zoom is the global, regional, local, what scale we're talking about. Think about something like, oh my gosh, we could just take climate change or sustainability. Geographers look at them using all of these. And they may be looking at something, how it affects people at a local scale, or maybe in their state, or maybe in the world. So this slide is a great one for you guys to steal. It's out by National Geographic. It's fine to get it. And this presentation, you probably already guessed, is already in a file folder for you, so you should be able to see it. Let's see. To talk about perspectives, we're going to stop for a minute, and we're going to do two examples. One is going to be about how geography is spatial, because I want to make sure everyone realizes what that is and what it looks like when you do something geographically. So this other poster that also is in that presentation, you're welcome to use, talks about how geography is spatial and what makes it different. Well, it builds knowledge, provides perspective. Boy, it's the best at the next. Detects patterns. You're going to see that in just a minute when we look at some maps. It helps reveals connections between people and places and cultures and science and plate tectonics and weather. And then of course, it helps people make decisions and find solutions to problems or challenges they might have. Geography really is a lifelong skill. So to start with this, I would like you to just think about, you can put some answers in the chat if you like, just scribble them down on a piece of paper if you would like to do that. But we're going to think about the 10 biggest countries in the world by population, not by square miles, but by population. And I know that everyone knows the first two. So if you'd like to scribble them down or throw them in chat, what are some of the other 8 besides China and India? What are the other biggest countries in the world by population? I just want you to think about it. You don't have to scribble things down. You don't have to put it in the chat. But even middle school students, high school students, teachers, we usually get a pretty interesting list. But a list is just that. You can make a list. You can stare at the list. And that's about all you can do. You can put it in a graph maybe and see those countries and have their names. But it's not geographic yet. So I hope I gave everyone enough time. Okay. And I'm just going to show you, I think these are 2018, 2019 kind of estimate numbers, the 10 most populous countries in the world. So I am pretty sure a lot of you thought of the United States because of course we're a distant third, but I think now we're probably, for the 2020 census, are going to end up between 335 and 340. Around that area, but other places, I'm curious which ones you forgot about. There's Indonesia, there's Pakistan and Bangladesh on that list. You see Brazil and Nigeria. Mexico in the last couple of years passed up Japan, which is a big thing for demographers around the world, that Japan is now 11 because their population is very stagnant or declining, while Mexico is still growing. But what I want you to do is just look at this list. Hey, it's interesting. You can see where these countries are, but it's not spatial yet. Okay, before we look at maps, I want you to do one more thing. Think about the 10 largest cities, metropolitan areas in the world. And I know, again, that's going to be a pretty easy ask. You can list them, just scribble them, just think about them in your head. And take a moment to think, well, where are those conglomerates? Where are those giant metro areas that you hear about traditionally? And even though many places in the world are still growing right now, the list of really the top 20 is really quite interesting. Some of you may have heard of the concept of megacities. You have to have 10 million people or more to be considered a megacity. In 1970, they were like 3 in the world. And now I think there's between 25 and 30 megacities in the world, just from population growth. So here's a chart that I really liked when I found it, but there's a list to the right. If you look, there's probably things on here that you knew right away. You might remember Mexico City at one time was considered the biggest city. In Tokyo, you've got places in India like Delhi. You got Dhaka, Bangladesh. A lot of people don't think about Mumbai, former Bombay. You've also got Osaka, Kobe. That area is really huge. Cairo is snuck into the top 10. I know there's different ways to measure cities and if they're a metropolitan area or a single city, but this is a pretty good list. And you notice it does go to 20. So again, there's a wonderful chart, but look at the rest of this graphic. You see a map and they've colored in where those places are, okay, by continent. Look at the very bottom right corner. There are 4 cities on the list that are concentrated in China. There are 3 in India. There are 2 in Japan. That is starting to think geographically. So what we're going to do is something very simple. We're going to take these 20 data points and we're going to put them on a map. So this is a map that I threw together very quickly using National Geographic's Map Maker, which has a new version that's just going to be revealed here in the next few days, maybe last Friday, actually. And so you see 2 types of symbols. You see the little pins. Those are the top 10 cities. And then the circles, don't worry about the size of the circle, it's not relevant, but those are the top 10 countries in population. Next thing I would like you to do, we've put this data on a map. Do you see any patterns? Does anything jump out at you? Where do you see most of these? Are they in the southern hemisphere? Are they in the Western hemisphere? Are they near the coast? Are most of them in Asia? I hope this simple example shows you the power of geography. It's something as simple as taking 2 lists, which you could stare at forever and have students stare at them and go, oh, okay, those are the 10 biggest, who cares? But then you could look at it spatially. And of course, we're going to zoom in on a couple of these. Folks, this is Europe and Africa. The thing that surprises kids the most is that there are no top 10 countries or cities in Europe. Now, 70 years ago, that was not true. 100 years ago, there were certainly some cities in Europe that might be on the list. North and South America, besides the US and Brazil, probably Mexico City and a place like Sao Paulo, those are top 10s, you know, but there's not much. Well, let's look over here. Look, this map amazes me when you look at it. Some of you may know this, that 6 out of 10 people in the world live in Asia. I have 10 kids stand up and I say, okay, 6 of you stay standing, 4 of you sit down. The 4 is the entire rest of the world. But you 6 all live in Asia. I left Japan in this one, but of course Japan may disappear and we would put in Mexico, but there still are 12 or 13 data points of the 10 biggest cities and countries just on that screen. That is a pattern that would jump out to people if they were thinking about things spatially. Those dots, those places help us think about the world spatially. We would need to concentrate on this part of the world to really look at population growth. And of course, places like Africa and Latin America as well. But this is where the growth is taking place. I think most of you know that if we went back to before India was Pakistan and Bangladesh and India, If it was one country, it would have passed China a long time ago. It would be the biggest country in the world. There are definitely more people below. There are people below the Himalayas more than above in China, which I think is pretty amazing. Folks, the next example, just going to be two, something that I think all of you are going to be really, really familiar with, and that is Earth systems. I'm sure that those of you who teach science in some way are involved with this, especially at the beginning. Geography 101, if you're at a university, one of those first couple of days, you're going to talk about Earth systems. And for geographers, it's the geographic focus. It's really human environment interaction that they're really, really interested in. Because there are these 4 Earth systems, but they're so easy to introduce for students. Even in 4th grade, some of you might have to use different terms at first. You're just talking about air and land and life and water. Okay, but you can still let students know that the Earth basically has these 4 large systems. They all interact with each other. Okay, the living things and the atmosphere, the water, everything works together. Here's what I'd like to do next. As I go through these 4 quick introductions, very, very short, I just want you to think about something that begins in one of these 4 systems, a natural process. Okay, maybe not a natural process that starts in one of these systems, but ends up affecting more than just it, one or more of the other systems. I know ideas are popping into your head already, but we'll do a quick introduction. So folks, geographers, man, they're interested in one part of the Earth's crust, and that's just the lithosphere, the crust itself. We're talking about between 5 and 20 miles, that very upper part, like the eggshell of an egg. Why are we interested in that part? Well, that part we're interested in because that's where people live. Okay, that's where the biosphere is. So how does the lithosphere affect people? All right, is what we're basically looking at. Geologists, oh my gosh, they love all the layers, you know, and they're important to them. But for geography, it's basically the crust, is what we're looking at. Secondly, you got the atmosphere. And I know a lot of you teach about the different parts of these Earth systems, and you go into detail about it. Well, geographers aren't so much worried about the detail, but of how the atmosphere affects the other Earth systems, and especially people, okay, or animals. Okay, this to spend a little bit more time on because it's such an important issue in the world today. Water. Most of you know that 97% of the Earth is covered. You know, there's water, 70%, but 97% of that is salt water. Okay, it covers 70%. That means 3% is either locked up in ice. Okay, it's in groundwater, or it's in surface water. You know, lakes and rivers, those type of things. Out of that 3%, some of you may know this, we only get to use about 1%. About 1% of the Earth's fresh water, or one of that 3%, is open to us to use. That's why it's so precious. Okay, but the oceans, you know, a lot of you know, are drivers of climate and are the lead of climate change. This is really important to geographers, you can imagine. Lastly, of course, we have the biosphere, which is all living things. Now, remember, that's not just animals in the Amazon, but it's the people that live there. Okay, it's also all the plants. The biosphere is all living things. Okay, with that introduction, I know you've had enough time to think about things. We're going to back up just a little bit that may affect, start in one system or affect in another. Just virtually raise your hand. Did anyone think of earthquakes? I'll bet you there are some of you that did. Earthquakes not only affect the land, but definitely can affect the hydrosphere. Well, there might be a tsunami. Definitely affects living things, okay, in that case, on land. Absolutely true. Did anyone think of, a volcanic eruption? That's another one. Starts in the lithosphere, okay, but that ash and stuff goes into the atmosphere. Oh my gosh, it could affect people locally, but it also could affect people, wow, globally, not just locally, because, boy, remember the 1800s, the year without summer. It can change the climate of the entire planet or make us cooler, you know, because of volcanic eruptions in the past. Amazing. How many of you thought of hurricanes? That's a good one. Do they start in the atmosphere or hydrosphere? or both. It's the warm ocean temperatures, it's evaporation. You have these storms that are driven by winds, prevailing winds that bring them to the Gulf Coast or the East Coast. That's something that starts in a couple of systems, but can it affect the land with flooding? Can it affect people or animals? Wow, ask anyone in New Orleans, if a hurricane has affected their lives in the last 15 years. Absolutely, it can. Folks, this is the thing I want you to understand, is that we can talk about the Earth systems, we can talk about science, but really we're looking at the big picture. Okay, not just the spatial aspect of putting things on a map, okay, but also really importantly, looking at the big picture. And that's what geographers do really, really, really well. Okay, those two examples I hope helped a lot. The last thing we're going to do before we look at geography inquiry from National Geographic, the formal type of geo-inquiry, is talk about the 5 themes. I know some of you have seen the 5 themes in your textbooks, even science textbooks, definitely social studies textbooks for sure. But they're very friendly to me. And even though they've been around a long time, since the late 80s, early 90s, I think they're really helpful. So we're just going to go through very quickly, look at the 5 themes, just to remind you of them if you know them. And if you haven't really worked with them, I think you'll find this very helpful. And then we're going to do it a second time. And we're going to look at the 5 themes using the Amazon as our focus. So that'll be interesting. All right, here we go. Folks, location, it doesn't have to be the first of the 5 themes, but usually is listed first, is location. And it basically answers the question, where is it? And there are 2 types. Some of you may know these. There's absolute location, like a latitude and a longitude, a GPS reading that your car is getting or your phone is getting, and there's relative location, what you're close to. So an absolute location could be your house address or the corner of 2 streets in your city. A relative location for me in Las Vegas, I a lot of times tell people I used to teach in Henderson, Nevada, and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, where the heck is that?" And I say, "Well, it's just south, and east of Las Vegas. It's out toward Hoover Dam." And they're like, "Oh, that's a relative location. Southern Nevada is about 250 miles from the beach in California." Oh, okay. Those are relative locations. Hey, I'll meet you at this restaurant. It's near the Stratosphere Tower in Las Vegas, but it's down the strip and you have to turn right. That's a relative location. I think people generally use relative location much more. Many professions use, an absolute location. They have to, if you're flying a plane or piloting a boat. But in this case, relative location is what we use. It really is answering the question, where is it? This confuses students. You may have run into this. We talk about place. Well, wait a minute. Isn't that the same thing? Place is completely different. Place is a dot on the earth is a place, is a location. A place is an area that has unique physical or human characteristics. You're looking at a wide variety. In fact, I always forget what I have on here. Machu Picchu in Shanghai and the Taj and the Grand Canyon or the Eiffel Tower. Those are places. There's something special, something unique about them. Some are physical, mostly, like the Grand Canyon. Others are basically human characteristics. If I were to say New York, Disneyland, Paris, things pop into your head. Paris, oh my gosh, there's Eiffel Tower, there's the Notre Dame, there's the Seine River, there's people having breakfast on the sidewalk and baguettes, and oh my gosh, people are speaking French. And you know what? This is not a location. This is a place, has a very rich array of characteristics, physical and in many cases both human as well. Next is the most important one for geographers, and I hate to point out a most important one, but this is definitely it, would be human environment interaction. I know these are a little bit hard to see because there's lots, but anytime that you have the physical world affecting people and how the people affect the physical world, that's when you're getting into human environment interaction. So examples here, you see the hurricanes coming across the Pacific into the Gulf. You see wildfires, you see planting agriculture, you see burning of rainforests, you see a drought, you see pollution. There's examples all throughout the world. And this is where geography shines. How is the weather in a certain place affecting the people who live there? Think about two places that are really different. The Arctic and the Amazon basin. Do the people that live in those areas live in the same houses, wear the same clothes, tell the same stories? I don't think that's the case. Well, that's because they live in a different environment. Exactly. But think about the other way. You can go exactly the other direction. Are people changing the environment in some way in these places? So you see clearing of forests, burning rainforests, you see pollution. Boy, are humans good at that. We pollute the land, we pollute the air, we pollute the water, but that's affecting the physical world. This is really the most important for geographers. Then you have movement, which is probably the easiest when I work with students and teachers, because I used to tell people three things move. People move, goods move. You just had Amazon Prime Day. And then you have ideas, of course, that move. How did democracy get from one place to another? How did Christianity go from one part of the world to all parts of the world? But there's also movement in nature, not just in weather. But if you look at the very bottom, it's hard to see, but you see, looks like something in the ocean. Those are whales. And I was thinking, wow, there's movement in nature. We have Arctic terns who go from pole to pole. That's movement. They're like the world champs in that. But movement is very easy, but very important to geography because it connects places. The last one, of course, I think a lot of you probably have to use in different classes is regions. Regions could be big, they can be small, they can be human, they can be physical. There's a few here like the Amazon basin, of course, I had to throw in the Sahara Desert at the bottom, the Great Basin you see on the right, very unique part. Look at the regions of the United States. Every textbook I've ever seen that social studies, history, you open that page and they have it divided by regions, but they don't always look like this. That's okay. Anything can be a region as long as you can tell me what are the unique characteristics that make it a region. Could we have the Northeast? Or maybe we could have New England. They're probably going to be a little different states. Yeah, you can have the Southwest instead of the West. It is fine, as long as you can tell why you're lumping places together. Think of a really easy one like Latin America. Why do we study everything from the Rio Grande all the way down to the tip, Tierra del Fuego? Why do we study that together? Well, pretty easy. There's a common history, there's a common geography, there's a common language, and there's a lot of commonalities. Of course, it makes sense to study Mexico with the rest of South America, and then North America, what's left probably isn't a region. Very simple. Folks, I am telling you, even after all these years, no matter if I'm in a second grade classroom, 5th, 7th, 12th, teaching teachers, once I explain the 5 themes to them, they can be really helpful for students. Let's very quickly then look at the Amazon, because here's what I want you to do. I have a little bit of homework for you that you can do once we're done with the presentation, maybe tonight. And that's going to be to pick a place in the world and to use the 5 themes to describe it. So here we go again. Here's location. If you're wondering, the 3 degrees south, 60 west happens to be Manaus, biggest city in the Amazon basin in Brazil. That would be an absolute location. But you're looking at, around the lodges, you can see, but you can look at the whole Amazon basin. Where is it? Well, it's north and south of the equator. It's relative, but it is also absolute. Folks, places. Every one of you who've been down to Peru, to an institute, a teacher workshop, boy, you know this place. You've seen pictures that might be either Indiana or Mazan there, but you think of people, you think of animals, you think of the river. The Amazon is the most amazing place. I know you know that. The building at the bottom is the Opera House in Manaus. Okay. Folks, human environment interaction. I know it's mostly bad news in the Amazon, especially in Brazil, maybe not so much Peru, but there's just a million ways that people have altered the system, altered the Amazon. There are good things as well. You see ecotourism going on here, but you see bad things like roads being built and mono agriculture coming in. Folks, very simple for kids to think about one place and use the 5 themes to describe it. Movement, heck, how did you get to the Amazon when you went down for an educator academy? How do you move around? There's not a lot of roads unless you're going to Nauta. That's about the only road that leaves Iquitos right now. There are airports in some cities. Once in 2012, I sailed from the mouth of the Amazon all the way up to Iquitos, which is 2,300 miles. Never saw a road. I saw some streets in little towns, and I saw lots of boats, and a couple of places had airports. Look at the bottom left. You have conquistadors, movement. Boy, they brought disease with them. They brought Christianity with them. They brought all kinds of things with them. Folks, this is movement in the Amazon. And lastly, the regions. Wow, you probably know Peru's got a coastal region, which is desert and dry. You have the Andes, high altitude, and then about, half of Peru is in the Amazon basin, especially where you go out in Iquitos, state of Laredo, lowland tropical rainforest. 3 areas, 3 regions of Peru. The Amazon region, my gosh, it touches 7, 8, 9 countries, biggest rainforest in the world. I wanted to show you these two because not only can you use the slideshow, but I mean, just introducing how geographers look at the world. I think the 5 themes are really, really, really helpful. So here's what I would like you to do tonight. And I think we're pretty much on time where I was hoping we'd be about this time, about 11:30. But I want to share with you this activity I've used with, oh my gosh, down to 3rd and 4th grade, all the way up to high school and actually at the university as well. This as teachers. I can introduce the 5 themes to you or remind you of the 5 themes, but if you don't use them, you might not remember it in a couple of days. So I always have students do this activity, and this is in the folder as well, these 2 handouts, and it's using the 5 themes, and I call it my place. So I want you to think about this now, even though you may do it later. I want you to pick a place that you love and that you know really well, because you're going to put that place up at the top. And then what students do is that they're going to describe their place. It's almost like a book report. Well, tell me about your place, but you can't just write about it. You have to tell me about it in terms of the 5 themes. What's the location? What's unique about it? What's the place? How has it changed over time? Human environment interaction. How do you get there? Is it easy to get to? Is it hard to get to? Do you have to walk? Do you have to fly there? Okay. Is it in a region? Is it part of a region? Or maybe it's a tiny place, but it's a region all to itself. On the left, you see just a help sheet. So if students get to the point where like, oh, I'm not quite sure what you mean about human environment interaction. Even tonight, when you look at this, you can say, oh, okay, well, I need to give examples how physical geography affected this place. How has this place changed over time? I've been going to this place since I was a kid. How has it changed since I've been there? Is there now a road to this place? Is it paved? What's the weather like? How does it affect people? How do I have to dress when I go to this place? You get the idea, folks. What I'd like you to do is try this on your own, but pick a place you know. Pick that favorite place you go to as an escape. That aunt or grandmother's house that you went to in the summers when you were a kid. Your favorite place in the whole world. It can be tiny, it can be big. It could be a city you visited once. It could be the Amazon basin. It could be Napo Lodge. It could be the Sukasari River. Pick a place, but I tell students this, make sure it's a place you really know well, because this is really difficult if they don't know the place. If they do know the place, or you know the place, it's pretty easy for you to describe it. So in your time, if you think you would be interested in using this, for a geography or for a science class to introduce kind of geography and the 5 themes, I will tell you, look out, because kids really love this because you're giving them a choice. They get to pick a most amazing place they love. It could be their bedroom, could be Disneyland, it could be whatever, but they really enjoy doing it, but they also use the 5 themes. So that's why I wanted to share this, and it is in the folder. You can find it later. You can use it yourself, and of course, I hope you can use it with students later on. Okay. I was hoping that around 30-minute mark, we would be about here, and I think we're pretty good to look at the formal process, that's an important word, for Geo-Inquiry. National Geographic, this has been around there for, probably a little more than 5 years now, part of reorganization and refocusing at National Geographic. I think some of you might remember things like Geography Awareness Week from the late 80s all the way through probably about 2010 or so, a different theme each year in Geography Awareness Week. I will tell you, National Geographic has left awareness behind. Basically, the last thing you see here at the bottom, action. They want students and teachers and citizens to take action. The time for telling about the world and finding out where places are, it's still important, but it's in the past. we need to act, and we need to act now, whether that's about sustainability issues or whether it's about plastic pollution, whether it's climate change. We're past that. And this basically is a very formal outline that National Geographic did to get teachers and students to do geo-inquiry. But the most important thing is, even though you go through the process, is to take action of some kind. So this poster you can find online as well. It's fine to use. Asking and developing geographic questions, collecting information, doing that research, finding out about the challenge, whatever it is, visualizing that information. That means making a map, means creating charts. It may mean making a PowerPoint with visuals so you can show a place in the world that's having a particular problem. You want to create a story, because eventually you want to tell this story to someone. Okay, whether it's a school board or your principal or a city council or the United Nations, you want to create a story that you can share, and it has to be not only visual, but spatial. And then, of course, what you're trying to get people to do is not just you acting, but to get people to act, to make actual decisions and changes in their life that will affect whatever problem you've decided that you're going to tackle. So the next page here, you can find in the file folder for today, you will find the outline, the entire outline for Geo-Inquiry, what we're looking at now. This introduction is a fabulous introduction to have students just read, whether you're in a 10th grade class or whatever, just to let them know what geography is, but then to look at the Geo-Inquiry process. And we're going to take just a minute. I want you to look at the 5th paragraph, because I want you to realize that these 5 steps are something that you would probably do. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you probably might do a Geo-Inquiry type of lesson maybe once a quarter. This is not how you could teach every day, but it's when you're taking on kind of project-based education. So I'm actually going to read this paragraph. I want you to relax for a moment. You can follow along, you can just close your eyes, but this is it in a nutshell. The Geo-Inquiry process is a 5-step method designed to teach the skills necessary to think and reason geographically, and includes asking geographic questions, acquiring geographic information, organizing and analyzing that information, and using the information and questions to make informed action. The Geo-Inquiry process relies on geographic perspective as the foundation, but it offers students a unique lens to analyze space and places and interconnection of systems in our world. Geographic perspective is interdisciplinary and allows for the examination of complex issues at various scales. Think of the scale as being the zoom lens of geography. The scale can be local, regional, global. But by using geographic perspective with the Geo-Inquiry process, students begin to connect complex components, different parts. They see patterns and make connections as they look at the world differently in order to make informed predictions, well-reasoned decisions, or even ultimately to take action. Folks, if you like to do this type of project-based education, anything in the sciences or social science, you could use this method. Folks, this is in the file from National Geographic as well. It's a large PDF that has visuals and all kinds of information to help you go through the steps. I wonder if any of you have used this before, but just look at these briefly, and I'm going to give you an example. Think about you would like to do something on, well, let's take the big ones, climate change, sustainability. Here's the steps you would go through. Okay, first you want to get kids to ask good geographic questions. You may have a topic, sustainability. What does that mean? You know, look at phase 2. They need to find out what that is. They need to do research. What are sustainability issues? What are climate change issues? What are the problems that we see? How is it different for people in their city opposed to what it is when you think about the problem of climate change globally? Okay, they eventually will take that information, that research, that stuff they've dug into. They're hopefully defining or narrowing it down to a couple of topics, and they want to make a map. They want to make some graphs. They want to create some visuals. They want to take that data and make it geographic, make it spatial. Okay. Ultimately, you've got to create a story. And National Geographic recently, they've been talking about their storytellers. Yes, they're scientists. Yes, they're geographers. Yes, they're photographers, but they tell really important and gripping stories. And the more gripping they are, the more people will take action. So you're going to create something, a storyboard, a PowerPoint presentation, uh, a science board, like an old science fair. I don't care. You need to put together something that you can share with other people, because ultimately you're looking at phase 5. How do we get people to act? How do we get people to actually make changes or make decisions and do something? Um, and there is an assessment process at the end, which is not as important. When you're looking at this outline, it is a very formal system. It's not that you can't help kids understand geography better by having them create great geographic questions just by itself. That's a great skill to have, to get kids to ask the right questions about a place or about an issue. It's great to have them do research, but if you'd like to kind of follow this process all the way through, it can be very valuable. I'm going to give you one quick example from a team from a middle school in Las Vegas that was looking at plastic pollution, because it's one of the big things at National Geographic over the last 4 or 5 years. And so they got kids to start thinking about that, asking questions. Well, what kind of plastic pollution do they have at their school? Oh my God, they use a lot of bottles. There's straws, there's plastic all over, there's packaging. They did lots of research about their school, and they decided, oh my gosh, we use only bottled water. And just think of how many bottles. They calculated how many bottles they would just use at school and get thrown into trash or into recycling. And they were like, boy, we can do something about this. They visualized the story. They put down where the trash cans were in their school, made a map of it, where the trash ends up not in the trash can. How many bottles end up in trash and not recycling? Why is that? Because there's not separate containers. They made a great geographic story that they could share with their PTA, with their principal, with the committees at school, because they actually got so excited they wanted to act on this and they wanted to do something. Their solution was, we need water stations and we need to get rid of bottles. We need to not have any bottles, plastic bottles at all at the school in the next year, in the next 2 years. They need to be gone. We need to raise money, and we need to have water stations, and kids need to bring their own bottles. They were using thousands of bottles, and it's like, we can do our part. We can take action to do something. This took an entire year. They did a little bit each quarter, working up toward the end. These were 8th graders. They wanted to get this plan out, and before the year ended, the principal and the school decided to follow them amazingly, and said, we're going to get rid of bottles. We're only going to have stations. We're going to have refillable stations in all parts of the school. We're going to have recycling still. We're going to make sure there's 2 separate things, but it's an incredible year-long process. It could be something just for a quarter, but it could be any topic. Last slide I want you to see is I just, of course, threw out a topic. And I just like to think about geographic inquiry in the place that the Morpho Institute and all the teacher institutes work. Look at this place. These are the tropical rainforests around the world. This is taking data, putting it on a map. Where are the tropical rainforests? We know they hug the equator. The largest is in the Amazon. But the Congo Basin is quite large. Southeast Asia, okay, and also Indonesia. Places like Borneo, okay, Sumatra, some of the last remaining rainforests in the world. But let's think about geo-inquiry for a moment and just use this as an example. Most of you could do this in your science or geography class. Where are the rainforests located first? You got to search or create a map. What patterns do you see? Where are these places? Okay. If you had a map of rainforests in 1900 or 1850, and then rainforests today, you can see how they've shrank. That is making it geographic. You can see what's happening to rainforests. You consider things like, where are they located? Are they near the equator? Does elevation play a role? That type of thing. Also climate. These places are in areas that are in the tropics or tropical climates. It's a much wetter place. You know that the Amazon creates half of its own rain that falls again. The water that's evaporated falls back in there. Folks, first is just looking at rainforest. Then, wow, the fun part comes in. What are challenges to the rainforest? And you're thinking about telling a story and doing research. This is how you could split it up. Have groups of kids take on each of these things. Well, mining is a problem in the Amazon, land and water pollution, population issues, meaning populations moving to the rainforest and clearing it. You get monoculture farming and ranching, habitat destruction. Of course, there's climate change issues, the extinction of species going on still at an incredible rate in parts of the rainforest in different parts of the world. The loss of indigenous cultures, something very important to the heart, the Morpho Institute. You could have each group of students, 2, 3, 4 students, take on these issues, do the research, come up with a story. The most important thing is the last 2. Folks, look at this. It's a different animal for people who live in the rainforest opposed to the people who don't live in a place with rainforest. What's being done internationally to mitigate these issues? So what's the UN doing? What are countries doing? What do we do at climate conferences when we go? But also, what actions can be taken by students or citizens in a country that's far from a rainforest, that don't even know what a rainforest looks like, but they care about the future of the planet. They care about climate change. They know that we're on the road to extinction. Okay, what can we do? Folks, this is 2 more groups in your classroom toward the end of Geo-Inquiry. Let's see what people are doing with Conopac. What are those communities doing that's helping the rainforest live? How are they doing sustainable development? How are they doing a sustainable farm out in Sukasari and not clearing forest? Okay, what can people do in the United States, in the UK, in Australia, okay, that can make a difference and help preserve the rainforest? 2 different questions. That is Geo-Inquiry. That's just one example. Folks, you can use Geo-Inquiry with a lot of things, but it is a process that takes you a while, and you've got to have the kids have some time and some freedom to do that research and to make a story and to drive people to make some changes. Folks, this last picture, years ago, I had a geography professor who ended all slideshows with a sunset. And of course, if you've been to the Amazon, you've been out to Napo, you've been to the Canopy Walkway. And this is actually probably tree number 6, looking out across at sunset, out across the rainforest. That brings me, look at that, 45 minutes. I can't imagine that once in a while I get things just about right. The introduction to not just geography and the perspective, but to Geo-Inquiry. And now I'm positive we have lots of time for questions. So heck, I'm just going to stop my share. And I think Kelly's going to be very excited that I wasn't sure it would take 45 or 50 minutes. And I know that there are a million things that you wanted to jump in as we were going, but I think it really does work better this way, that we finish and then that she can look at the questions and we can give it a shot. I'll do my best.
Yeah, that's so great, Herb. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. There was one question. So go ahead, everybody, if you have further questions, we will have a few minutes for those who can plop them into the chat. Herb, can you talk about, there's a question in here, the lithosphere versus geosphere. Is there a reason to use one term over the other? Or what is that?
Well, in general, the geosphere meaning the entire planet and the different layers. And we know that some of the actions that take place in the lithosphere, which is just the crust, it's the upper mantle and the crust. Think about it this way with kids. It's really places that are like 5 miles to 20 miles deep. That's the Earth's crust. Nevada, we're thin crust pizza. We're like 5 miles. Okay? On an ocean ridge, it may be 20 miles until you get out of the crust, but it's where the plates interact. And so the lithosphere is a geology term, basically. That's just that very top layer of the Earth, while the geosphere really can be the entire system and all the layers, the mantle, the core, how they interact. It can be a little bigger idea.
Whoops,
Kelly.
Any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat, but you feel free to unmute and ask, or anything else.
I do see that you put in a note that the resources, everything I showed them, the slideshow, the handouts, the nice big PDF of the entire Geo-Inquiry thing from National Geographic's already in. You could find it online, but heck, I thought we might as well throw it in there. But I was very interested to see how many of you have used the 5 themes or used geography. I know some of you teach geography as well as science. But I was curious about how you think you'll be able to use geography differently now, or how that you could use it, when you're in your science class. And I will try my best to answer any question, but I can't guarantee I can answer. You can raise a hand, speak up, put it in chat.
Herb, Libby here. I teach kindergarten, and I was just curious if you've used this place, the handout that you have, like if you've used that with younger grades lower than third. I mean, I have a few ideas of how I could adapt it, but I just wanted if you had any thoughts about it.
I will tell you that I have visited lots of classrooms, and I've actually done this in first and second grade. But we even used the geosystems. We just use different words, it's land and water and air, but the my place is very interesting because, and it might be a discussion. It may not be something they write down. It may be brainstorming. You have your kids together and you're like, what's a region? Well, let's think about our school. Kindergartners are usually in their own region. It's like they're toxic or something. They have their own couple of rooms and a playground, and it's like no one gets near the kindergartners. Why is that? Are there places in your school, ask your students, where only teachers go? Are there places where everybody goes, like the lunchroom? Regions can be regions in your school. Use a map of your school. Show them what region they're in. They're the special kindergartners. They're set apart from everybody. We got to protect you guys, or maybe you are toxic, nobody can get near you. Do something just in your neighborhood. But I don't think the 5 themes are that tough. Can you teach about movement? They walk in lines, don't they? They go to the bus. They go to lunch. Do they see animals around their school at any time? Are there birds? There's lots of ways to do it. I've only really I've never done a kindergarten class, although I've been in kindergarten classes, but first and second, we've definitely done the 5 themes. We've done Earth systems in those places. I hope that's helpful.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I'll make a plug for David Sobel's Map Making with Children book, where in the very beginning he has a developmental understanding place and regions, and I can put that into the chat, or I'll share that with everybody. And Herb, I'm not sure if you've seen that, but it's a really interesting. It's exactly.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's another book that some of you may have seen. It's called The Librarian Who Measured the Earth. It's about Eratosthenes and how he first figured out that not only proved the Earth was round, but measured it pretty accurately 2,200 years ago. And it's kind of made for like 4 through 8, but it's a great illustrations and a very interesting book about geography. I'm not sure why that particular one popped into my mind when you mentioned the other, but it's a really neat one as well. If you don't know the story of Eratosthenes, boy, look that one up. It's pretty amazing.
That's great. Any other questions?
I was just going to do a comment, and I'm glad you're going to put that map thing in, because that I think is really a hard concept. I mean, I have pretty much 8th and 9th graders and some older students, but that whole trying to relate things, and like you said, if you put 2 lists up, how do you connect those? I mean, and you talk about graphing, and I guess I tend to do, or we as just a science department tend to do more like physical graphing instead of doing like mapping. And I think I'm going to try switching that a little bit now, if I can find some, good source that will help them. But I think that to them is important, and they need to be able to relate to, the world.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me that. I think everybody could use a little bit more spatial thinking in whatever they do, whether in school or not. But I will tell you, I will give you another plug for the new map maker at National Geographic, which is completely free. You don't have to have an account. You don't have to sign up. Kids can use it. Teachers can use it. And it's a very simple GIS, Geography Information Systems map. So some of you I know probably know of ESRI and about GIS and about ArcGIS Online, and that's a little tougher, a little more complicated. But National Geographic's always had a very simple one that's free at their site. And they're just updated it after about 12 years. And I actually created a couple of activities for it that they should be releasing to people on the community. And you can join, the Nat Geo community of teachers and get emails and get information about stuff at National Geographic. But you can go to Map Maker And I think now that I think about it, I think it went live. The new version went live on Friday. It may not have all the tools because you know that with a system like that, you can drop things on the map. You can put symbols, you can color, you can draw lines, you can create maps right in class as you're teaching about something. But it's something that students can use and they can save them and they can put them in presentations. So if you're doing a real geo-inquiry sometime in the next year or two, and you're doing something where they have to make a map, a good place to start would be Map Maker. They used to call it, if any of you have heard of it, Map Maker Interactive. It's just going to be Map Maker now. And it's the idea was to improve it, but to also update it. There's lots of layers. It's just putting layers on a map so you can see climate, elevation, and population. That's GIS. You know, a lot of you use it probably in science, but that's the idea. But I'll give a plug because it's brand new and it should be up.
That's fantastic. And Kelsey put in the chat that the educator course has started and put the link for and gave a call out to that.
Oh, absolutely. And they do have some summer, boy, not just they in the last 5 years, they've had Geo-Inquiry courses but they've got some new ones. You're right. I think cohorts just started.
Yeah, that's
They
great.
also, I took last year, I took the Map Maker one, and or I don't know if it was called Map Maker, but it was like mapping. It was phenomenal. And I also took the climate change one, and I'm doing the pollution one this year. I mean, like free opportunities. Those courses are amazing.
And just the right timing. Boy, I'll tell you what, you probably had to use the old version when you were doing the mapping one. So whatever you experience, believe me, it's going to be better and a little more nimble and more layers, and the tools are going to be easier. And kids can figure it out without any help from you, which is an amazing thing. You may introduce it and show them how things work, but you know how that goes. Technology, they usually catch on quicker. I don't care if they're 4th grade or 12th grade. They catch on quicker, and they're showing you how to use it in a couple of days. And you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I could do that.
That's awesome. Wow, this is so good. Well, I know we're right at time. We have another session coming right up. I want to make a plug. Dr. Joseph Kursky going to be talking about story mapping, which is a really lovely complement, Herb, to what you've discussed with us today. So,
and that's tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah. So it's an excellent compliment, an excellent next step.
I will tell you.
We're really great.
Yeah, he is phenomenal. He's a mentor to many people, and you could not probably have a better instructor, speaker on geographic issues than Joseph. He's just the best. So you do not miss that session, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Herb, very much. And we're going to jump into the next session here, but to be continued. You keep in mind in these things, we're starting the conversation, and I know we can tap Herb. Well, not anytime we want him, but we can get Herb back for another webinar and a follow-up. And, you know, as you kind of mull these things over, we'll continue to offer this up. So
yeah,
I'm going to cut this one. And
if you put my email in the chat, even if they have questions about something, I don't have any problem with, getting them. It may take a day or two, but I'll be happy to answer or point them in the right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you. And, we're going to have a great conversation with Mike Gilmore coming up. So go grab some water. If it's happy hour, you can start early or hydrate. But I'll see you in the next room in just a little bit. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Herb.
Bye.